Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Top Voice Tuesday. This week on a Friday, we had to push the time back, but it doesn't change the quality of the conversation. I'm excited to talk to Andy Wang today about the future of the economy and financial planning and everything we're going through. Every person on planet Earth is trying to figure out what to do with their money, when, why, and how. And Andy is the guy that's going to help us do that. For those of you that are on the live stream, please do drop us a note in the chat, leave us a question. Andy cannot give you, I think, formal financial advice today, but he can give you at least some best practices and those sorts of things. We'll take those questions as we go. And for those of you listening on the podcast, please do check the show notes for all of Andy's links to be able to find him at the end of the conversation. So, Andy, thank you again. And for those of you that are listening in, we're going on Friday today. We were going to go Tuesday, but the beauty of life, I did a post on this yesterday. My wife and I welcomed twins on Monday morning, baby boy and a baby girl, and they are home, and everyone is doing well. And I thought, which was maybe not the best thing to think, that I could still do the show on Tuesday. They were in the hospital, everything was fine, but my relationship and being a good father got the better of me, and I decided let's move it to Friday. And Andy, you were flexible in accommodating that, so thank you for being on. So, Andy, please tell us who you are, tell us what you do, and tell us how you got to the top of the Top Voice Mountain.
Well, TGIF to everybody. Congratulations to Michael on his expanding family. That's very exciting. And
Thank you.
Kudos to you for, I admire having a positive outlook where, you assume, yes, I can do it, but then no problem having the right priorities and pivoting as needed. I think that's a good approach to life. So thank you for having me. I'm Andy Wang, managing partner at Runnymede Capital, host of the Inspired Money podcast. Sometimes I tell people that I help people to sleep better at night. And no, I am not a sleep doctor. I'm a 26 plus year financial advisor and planner. So I help individuals, families, and companies to translate economic transformation into opportunity. And often that means aligning money with meaning so that you can make confident decisions even in uncertain times. And as, I don't know, maybe the fortune cookie saying goes, we are cursed to live in interesting times. So the world is always full of uncertainties. This is my family business. I talk about money and return on equity as, well, not as a kid, but my dad would talk about return on equity and replacement of appliance cycles in the economy at the dinner table. My mom worked at Merrill Lynch as a broker. My dad was at the Bank of New York as director of research, and then he was money manager, chief investment officer for the bank's pension, for their investment counsel business. So he ran the bank's pension money as well as doing a lot of research. So that's kind of like always talking about money growing up. Didn't really think that I would join the family business, but I did, and really love it. Work with my younger brother, Chris, who previously was at the College Retirement Equities Fund, one of the biggest pension funds in America, managing the retirement funds of professors and those in academia. So yeah, I joined the business. I work with people to help guide them to make better financial decisions. We help them with their investments. And I started sharing some of those lessons because over time I realized that behavior and mindset really drive success more than market predictions. In sharing those lessons publicly on LinkedIn through real stories and not jargon is what I think helped me to become a top voice, because people connect with honesty and practical value, not charts and data.
What a great story. And you mentioned as we got started, you're in your dad's office today, going live from his office, and what a joy. My maybe as just a quick aside, my son always tells me when he's done with college, he wants to do what I do. And what a joy as a father to work with your son. So I'm sure your dad and mom are very happy to have you join the family business. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's fun to work as an advisor, but also a business owner, and it's much different than our previous experiences. In a larger corporate job where there's a lot more politics, right? We just kind of know what our lane is, and we want to serve our clients, and we do our work, and um, you're not worried about what the person in the next office is
That's right.
doing.
There's a lot of freedom in the world that we live in. So there's trades, of course. There's trade-offs to everything, but there's a lot of freedom in this world. So let's talk about maybe the state of the world, because I think you more than anyone is in a position to tell us more about the interesting times that we live in. I think many people think that this time is unlike any other time, and I mean, maybe there's some truth to that. But tell us what's really different about the economic landscape between inflation, interest rates, politics, and how that's affected. Now we've got a government shutdown, crypto, all of these things. What is really different, and what's shaping the world going forward that people need to think about?
There are so many things. If I boil it down to one thing, it's got to be inflation, because inflation is something that we hadn't seen in decades. After COVID, inflation rose to levels really not seen since the 1970s. We saw the consumer price index peak around 9% in 2022. And even now, it remains sticky in services and wages. And everybody knows that when you go to the supermarket, we're paying higher prices, or even going out to eat on a Friday night. Things do not, like, the dollar does not go very far. It's a little too easy to spend $100, and you look at your plate and you say, "Wow, I was expecting more."
Yeah.
So I think the challenge is that most advisors working today, I mean, everybody has never really managed their money in a sustained inflationary period. So everybody's trying to learn and figure that out in real time. My brother and I literally would talk to my dad and then try to reach out to some of his friends who were managing money in the 1970s and ask them, how do you position for inflation? And their advice was keep costs low, own real assets, and don't panic.
Mm,
So that's what we're trying to do. I mean, luckily, inflation has come down significantly from that peak of 9%.
yeah.
We're really closer to 3% now, which is a percentage point higher than what the Fed says is their target rate of 2. And I think that the question is, will the Fed adjust that target? Because it was kind of an arbitrary target. That 2% doesn't really mean anything
Mm,
other than they had picked that number many, many years ago and kind of stuck with that. So whether they adjust or not is the reality. Like, 3% inflation, is that something that we have to live with? But then the big unknown right now is, will the tariffs add more fuel to inflation? And we don't know. If costs rise for goods and parts, companies will either absorb those costs or pass it to consumers,
yeah.
most likely a combination of both. But either way, prices are likely to rise.
And that's a trailing effect, if I understand it correctly, in terms of the time it takes for those kinds of ripple effects to get to the average consumer. So when the average saver, the average family, the person who's trying to think about their future, what are you sort of mentioned a few things: the own real assets, don't panic. But what are the things people really can't do when it comes to these kinds of inflationary effects? I mean, what real everyday levers do I have to pull to try to weather the storm?
I think what we're seeing today is we're seeing almost two economies, because the wealthy, like the top 10%, are driving the economy. The top 10% of earners, I think the statistic is that they represent like 46% of consumer spending right now. Um, so it's almost half. So, like, people who are earning, in the top 10%, they're still buying, they're still going on trips. The middle class and lower income, it's getting harder because you're getting squeezed with higher expenses, higher costs at the grocery store. Um, and those higher costs, what are you going to do? You have to go get another job. Really, you have to cut your expenses somewhere. So people are eating at home more often. They're eating out less frequently. Some people are cutting back on travel. Right, we saw an explosion in travel after COVID because
Yeah.
everybody was under lockdown and hadn't been able to travel to go see family and friends or go anywhere. So we saw that um, we saw that take place. And so today, I think the question is, how do you live within your means? Are you looking for things like your recurring uh, bills, like
Yeah.
your cable bill? Um, you look at, where's your money going? Because most people know how much they're earning. I would say that the majority of people don't necessarily know where's your money going out every month. And the majority of it goes to your goes to your housing, goes to your food, goes to your transportation, and goes to your health care. So people get scared by the word budgeting, right? It can be intimidating and it
Yeah.
sounds like too much work. If you really just look at those four items, that might represent 70% of your expenses. So then the question is, among those four items, are there places that you can cut back? Sometimes you just look at your credit card bill and you say, all right, the recurring items, is there a way to get it down a little bit? Sometimes you can call the cable company and say, hey, I'm just spending way too much. Can I downgrade to a different package? Sometimes their customer retention team will just give you discounts.
Right.
And other times you just see that by looking, you say, oh my gosh, I'm paying for this subscription that I'm not using at all. I need to get rid of that. So that's just like a good, simple exercise to go through. And I
Yeah.
would say one more good thing, like annually, put it on your calendar, like revisit your car insurance, your homeowner's insurance. Those are things that tend to ratchet up under the radar, um, and we forget about it. So
Yeah.
if you actually put it on your calendar, like after New Year's, let me just take a look at the insurance, call the insurance company, get some quotes, or call a broker, an insurance broker who will do that for you, and see if you can get cost savings
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
switching carriers.
Those are great. Those are great tips, and I want to talk about and ask about the present versus the future. But it before I do that, it reminds me you talked about budgeting, and in the world of fitness, the first thing a personal trainer will tell you is if you want to lose weight or change your body composition, you've got to spend 3 or 4 months tracking your calories. You've got to know what you're eating, and I think you're saying the same thing. You've got to know where you're spending. I just listened to a podcast the other day. Actually, it was a Diary of a CEO. We were just talking about that, and they had a guy on there that was talking about spending habits. He wrote a book about spending, and there's really most people don't understand what they're spending their money on, and that's just a great practical reminder. So let's talk about you. You mentioned some things we can do in the present, but it stands to reason that what we're going through is changing how we think about the future. If I have fewer options in the present because of rising prices, how does it change what I think about in the future, how I save, retirement planning? That's got to be a very complicated conversation from your perspective.
Well, I think that the more I think about it, and one can get really philosophical. Like there are many changes happening, but then again, it's like you boil it down to the essence, and you're like, well, it hasn't changed that much. It's it's if you just live within your means, you you spend less than what you earn, and you invest your savings over time, that's going to grow, and time being on your side, like that's the biggest weapon that you have in your retirement planning. I mean, some of the things that are changing, which, I mean, you have to be realistic. People are living longer. People, because of that, they're working longer. And I think that that's why financial planning becomes important, because the planning is really about flexibility. It's not about fixed endpoints. And if you look at retirement, like this is not our father or grandfather's retirement. I don't think that retirement is binary anymore. It's not you're working and then you stop. Many people are now designing second acts, they're consulting, they're trying to search for purpose-driven work. I just had a conversation with a client this week who they're both in the medical field, and they're talking about, like, they spent a lot of time last month traveling. They went to some national parks, they did hiking, and they went with some friends. And they said, well, you know what? We realized that our friend wasn't able to hike, as vigorously as we were. And it got us thinking, they're probably about 60 years old now. And they said, we were thinking that we might want to take a year off and travel while we can. Like, we have the health right now.
Yeah.
And can we do that? Like, that was the question that they were posing to me. Does that make sense for us to do? Can we do that? They felt very strongly that because they're in the medical field, that their work is in need. And they said, if we took a year off, we're pretty sure that we'd be able to return to our same jobs. And if not, we'd be able to get that job really anywhere in the
Somewhere.
country. So they're like, we're not worried about finding employment given what we do, but can we do that? And I think that those are kind of interesting exercises for people. But longevity, I think, is something that we have to deal with. And it means that your money needs to last 25, 30 years after retirement. So the question is, how do you define retirement? Are you doing some consulting? Are you doing volunteering? But I think one of the lessons, just to share with the viewers and listeners, is that many people, it's so easy when you talk about money or think about money, is to say, well, I just don't earn enough. Like, none of this applies to me. I'm just
Yeah.
living paycheck to paycheck. How can I plan for the future? Um, but I've seen it in my career. I mean, one of my clients, Mike, he worked the printing presses at a newspaper. He was an immigrant, came to the United States. He never had a high income. He was not an executive. He was not a high earner, but he always lived below his means. I think he brought his lunch to work every day, and he saved every month. He invested, like, he started investing in the 1950s or 60s, just whatever little he had. And man, over time
Over
that
time.
grew. But I mean, 40 years later, he was retired and he bought a little condo down in Florida. So he would spend time in his home in New Jersey, go down to Florida during the winter. I mean, he retired a multimillionaire. So you
Wow.
don't have to have a high income. It's just like, if you boil it down to, the simplest steps, it's like he didn't he didn't he wasn't competing with the Joneses. He didn't drive a fancy car. He was brown bagging it to work, and he enjoyed life. He wasn't like he
Yeah.
wasn't miserly, but he was frugal, and always saved and invest his money. So
So
I think
let's,
the consistency and simplicity, um, that's what counts. And he
yeah,
told me he never felt deprived. He just stayed deliberate.
that's a great story. And it gets back to what you mentioned at the beginning around behaviors and mindsets. And I want to maybe do a little exercise because what you just described is if I'm 25, 30 years old and I've got another, 50, 60 years to live, if I'm on the high end or something, then I have the benefit of time. But let's take this in chunks and maybe talk about the behaviors and mindsets of different demographics. So if I'm a 20 to 40-year old individual, what I'm hearing you saying, maybe that's high for 40, but invest early, be consistent, invest whatever you can, as little as you can, and let that grow. What if I'm in the 40s to 55 range? We're kind of bordering on the Gen X range. That's what I am. I think that's what you are. Nobody talks about
That's
us
what I am.
anymore, but we still exist. And I didn't do that early on. What are the behaviors and mindsets that now I need to approach if I'm in that kind of midlife demographic?
Well, I think those who are working in corporate, if they have a 401k plan, that's usually the easiest vehicle. You want to make sure that you're contributing as much as you can. You want to make sure that you're increasing your contribution over time. I mean, the easiest times to do it are when you get a pay raise or you get a bonus and you say, all right, I was living fine without the extra money before. I'm just going to sock more away into my retirement plan. And you can do that. Um, if it's not atypical to be middle aged, right? If you're in your 40s or 50s and you feel like, well, I don't have that much saved. But on the other hand, those are your like biggest earning years. Like the closer you're getting to retirement, often that's when you're making the highest income. So there are a couple of things you can take advantage of. One is there are catch-up contributions that you can make um, to retirement plans like a 401k, to an IRA when you're in your 50s. So you can sock more away. And I think that if you can do that, um, that will pay dividends, because the more you can sock away while you're still in your earning years, then when you're ready to transition, you will have that nest egg there. And it's never too late. It's
Yeah.
important to start as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's that phrase is the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago. The
Right.
second best time is today.
Yep,
And
exactly.
yeah, I think that's really, really a great reminder. So, what if I'm on the other side of, let's say, 55, or I'm close to 60? I want to retire. You mentioned longevity and living longer, working longer. And yeah, to your point, when they set the retirement age at 62, whatever that was 40 years ago, I think life expectancy was maybe close to 66 or 70. So
Right.
so the model didn't work in terms of the way things are happening now. So if I'm on the other side of, let's say, 60, 65, what can I do to sort of stay in the game longer, because I'm going to be around much, much longer? I mean, those individuals have Social Security, so I guess that there's still some benefit there because it'll pay out. But what's the behaviors and mindsets for that group?
Well, I think that oftentimes when we think about retirement, it is a huge transition, because our identity is so tied to the work that we do, and that's how we're spending most of our day. Uh, Work is frequently also like important to our social circles too. It's like people from work. So if you if you're following the older model of, okay, I'm going to retire, I'm leaving my job, I'm going to stop working, that's a transition. And mentally, the mindset of, okay, I'm not getting a paycheck anymore, therefore I need to be careful with what I have. I need to protect and be more conservative. I think the thing that people don't think about often is, it's not the Excel spreadsheet, it's not the numbers, it's how is it that you want to spend your day.
Hmm.
um what is your purpose now? Because if it's not going to serve your customers or your clients or whatever role you were in your job, um right, it's like suddenly you have this meaning of life moment saying, what's important to me? How do I want to spend my time? And sometimes there are conflicts with the spouse too, because if one spouse is working, one was not, then one spouse may say, you got to figure out something to do because you're driving me crazy. So I think that that's also part of the planning. It's, where are you going to retire? Are you staying put where you are? Are you going to relocate to warmer climate? Are you going to go to a place that has lower taxes, lower property taxes, a lower cost of living? Um, that can have big benefits to somebody's retirement plan. And then it's just, yeah, how do you want to spend your time? Again, it's like, do you want to keep busy? Do you want to do consulting? Do you want to just volunteer? Sometimes that's just at a church or with a charity that's something dear to your heart. And yeah, what's important to you? I think that it's important to really examine values and how you want to spend your time, who you want to spend it with, because that again, that's part of the decisions when it comes to geography. right? Do you
Yeah.
want to be near family? Do you have are your children, where do they live? And yeah, where do you want your home base to be?
Well, one of the things that I have a question that's coming up for me, but I'm so curious to know what's the most common thing you hear from people in terms of regrets when they get to later in life and they're trying to retire. Maybe they're not in the position they want to be. When they look back at their younger selves, because so much of what you're describing is how much did my younger self consider what my future self might want. And look, this is a really hard thing for the brain to do. We know that deferred benefits are valued less than present benefits, and there's science behind that. But what's the biggest regret that you hear from people, or the advice they would give themselves if they could do it over? Because I think the average listener may want to know, how can they buffer some of what their future self may not have accounted for?
Yeah, there are two things. I mean, one is when you're young, you tend to want instant gratification. And the lesson there is, okay, delayed gratification is going to benefit your future self. Um, I think that the reality is that many people do save for retirement, and then come retirement, they're just so uncertain about, I'm afraid to spend because I don't know
Mhm.
how much I can afford. I don't want to run out of money. I want to live off of interest and not draw down my principal.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, I think it's very common that people are afraid to spend. And that's the benefit again of planning, because you can see what are your uh, likely expenses annually, how much is your portfolio generating for you, and then you do a little number crunching to say, all right, can I live to age 95 without running out of money? And if not, then you can make adjustments. You're like, all right, you know what, I can afford to make upgrades to my house, or I can take a big family trip and
Yeah.
invite my kids and their kids. uh, to answer your question, I think that the biggest regret is that while we're living, we're so focused on the daily grind, on trying to make our paycheck, to do our work. And, we're pretty sleep deprived here in the United States. It's like we're always running.
Yeah. I resonate
And
with that given my current circumstances.
exactly, you have a lot of things on your plate. I think the biggest regret is that people say, and this is something that people realize end of life. Like, nobody is in hospice lying there saying, I wish I made another $10,000.
Mm,
The the regrets are common. The regrets are, I wish that I had, repaired this relationship with my sibling, that I didn't do, or I wish that I had, had that conversation with my parent before they passed away. And I think that, those are some of the really common human experiences. It's like, what matters in life? It's your family, it's your friends, it's your community, and it's it's really not about money. You need money as a tool, because the money will give you flexibility. It gives you choices. But the money should be secondary, because if you study blue zones, it's like, what gives you happiness and fulfillment? Usually it's not getting a bonus check. It's 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 sharing experiences with the people that you love, and making memories
mm.
with people that you care about,
That's
and having twins.
having twins. That it's beautiful advice, Andy, and I think a lot of people need to be reminded that money is a tool, and for those people that are struggling, there are real families and individuals that are trying to make ends meet, and
Yep.
we realize that is a stress unlike anything that you can compare to. And so it's certainly not to be dismissive of those real experiences, but I think what you're suggesting is that we understand that when it's all said and done and you look back, hopefully you're in the fortunate position to be surrounded by people that you love and that you care about. But most people don't say, I wish I had worked more, I wish I had made another $10,000. And it's really a beautiful reminder to all of us about what matters most. Andy, as we get ourselves wrapped up here a little bit with time, I want to get to your bonus question. But For the person listening to this conversation, what are 2 to 3 things that you would just really encourage them, given what we're going through right now at the macro level, that they can take away from this conversation about protecting their financial future, setting themselves up for success? What are the 2 to 3 things that you would really encourage people to take away from this conversation?
I think prepare, don't predict. No one can forecast the next interest rate cut, war, or market swing, but everyone can build flexibility into their plan.
Mm,
And you just make those micro adjustments. It's not unlike how you planned to host this conversation on Tuesday, and then you had to make a pivot. The same goes with your budget, your household spending, your income, your portfolio. I mean, things are always changing, and there are things outside of your control. I think within your control, it's like you try to automate discipline as much as you can. Don't
mm.
rely on your willpower. So if you can automate your saving, your investing, rebalancing of your investments, that helps you make progress even on your worst day when you're not wanting to think about saving. It's like, all right, you set up like an automatic deposit from your paycheck to your checking account for your emergency fund, or it's the 401k. You're contributing every paycheck. That's happening automatically, and then those investments are helping you to make money while you're sleeping. And then lastly, just I think anchor your money to purpose, because like I said, money's a tool. It's not a scorecard. When your financial plan aligns with your values, I think that's when one tends to make smarter, calmer decisions, because it's like there's something bigger than yourself, and kind of just something that keeps you anchored and moving in the right direction.
That's really, really beautiful. And I'm going to steal this phrase, automating your discipline. It's a great reminder that willpower is not enough. I talk about it in the book that I wrote. It's true. It's scientifically proven. And the way you do that is by anchoring on your values. And I work with companies all the time, and we talk about the purpose of values are to help you make decisions in uncertain or stressful times, right? My
Right.
values pull me back to a moment where I say, what's most important to me and how do I make the best decision possible? And what I love about what you're saying is you're reminding everyone that it's not about the size of the nest egg or the size of the bucket of money. It's about how does that nest egg or bucket of money or whatever line up with my values. And I can see why you're such a successful financial advisor with that kind of perspective.
Well, thank you, Michael. Really
So,
enjoyed spending this time together.
yes, I love it. I love it. What a great reminder. So let's get to your bonus question for the week. Is, as you know, there's a tradition on this podcast, which I also shamelessly stole. Left for you from the last guest is a question about what's one thing you would do differently in your career if you could go back and change something, knowing what you know today. This is a great question about your future self and your past self, tied to what we were just talking about. So I love the way these questions line up. So what's one piece of advice or one change you'd make if you could go back and do it all again?
One of my biggest regrets is that before joining the family business, I was living and working in Boston, and I regret selling my condo. I would tell my younger self, do not sell that condo, because my purchase price was so good back in 1990. I'm trying to think. I think 1997. Anyways, it was like before real estate just took off. And Boston is one of the areas where uh, it's like build it. They can't keep up with demand. They
Yeah.
can't build fast enough, given the demand for people wanting to buy properties there. So I don't even look to see like how much that property has appreciated.
Never go back and look.
But because my cost was so low, I could have been collecting rent all this time and had the appreciation that was significant. And I was like, that I would
There you
tell
go.
my younger self, hold on to some property, because yeah,
That's
it,
going to pay
it's
off.
it's a good wealth generator, and it'll pay. Yeah, I think collecting rent, not too bad, especially in a in a city like Boston. I mean, there's so many young people, there's so many universities,
Yeah.
and a lot of professionals there. I would
Yeah.
have done well. Would have
Yeah.
done well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. I sold a house in LA many years ago, and I don't go back and look at what it is now just because it's really painful. Andy, where can everyone find you to learn more about you? Reach out with questions. People that want to leverage your services. Where can everybody find you?
Thank you for that. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you look up Advisor Andy, you should find me. Would love to connect on LinkedIn. You can also go to inspiredmoney.fm. That will take you to my financial advisory firm, Runnymede Capital Management. But Runnymede is hard to spell. It's easier to spell inspiredmoney.fm. But yeah, would welcome any conversations. And I guess as an offer, I do offer a 3-minute free financial plan. We have a little widget that you can go to. So if you go to inspiredmoney.fm/get plan, you can go there and no obligation, no sales pitch. You can put in your information for when you want to retire, some basic information about your assets versus liabilities, and it'll do a quick number crunch, give you some information about what retirement might look like, and give some clues on how you can prepare or make improvements. And then if people want to have a conversation, I'm happy to have a conversation about that output. But you can do it on your own and just you know get some vision into the future, which is helpful.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has really been a great conversation. I know we could go for hours, and this conversation around the future of financial planning never goes away. And so please do reach out to Andy if you have any questions. Thanks to those that tuned in to the live. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, please do be sure to subscribe. And a little note, as we get close to the end of the year, we've got some big things coming for 2026 for this show and a broader platform for everyone. So, Andy, thank you for being part of the inaugural season of Top Voice Tuesday. And thanks for listening in, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me on. Everybody subscribe to Top Voice Tuesday because Michael is doing such a great job and presenting so many incredible shows.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.